The views and opinions expressed by the guests and hosts of this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Lansdowne Public Library or its affiliates.
Welcome to the Lansdowne Library's Geek Out podcast,
where we geek out about just about anything. I'm one of your hosts, Jeff.
And I'm your other host, Dave. This week, we're talking the Academy Awards, as the award season is upon us, and the biggest ceremony of cinema is here. And to discuss, we have some local movie buffs.
My name is John. I am a local movie buff, so I'm loving being here to talk about these.
My name is Laura. I too am a local movie buff, and I work here, but I'm very happy to talk about the movies that we worked very hard to watch, I say.
Yeah.
Before we get started, I do just want to say, for posterity's sakes, we are recording this prior to the Oscars this year, so you listeners at home might already know who's won. We don't. We're still having fun guessing.
Yeah, let's get into it. So, of the Academy Awards, it's the 95th, I believe. So they've been doing this for nearly a century. That's insane. I guess we should start with our guys' tastes in movies. You know, you love movies. What do you love about them?
I mean, what do I love about them? That's a loaded question, I think, because there's so many things. I think, for me, I just love the art of telling a story. Whether it's film or television or novels or anything, I can just get lost in how someone tells a story, even down to the names they give people and just the importance of that. I can just lose myself in all sorts of facets of it, but the story is what really does it for me. I just love, as I'm sure everyone does, a good story, but I love picking them apart, and I think movies are the most overwhelmingly great way of telling a story.
For me, I think I'm drawn to movies because as a kid, I was fascinated with movies with like special effects, particularly anything with like giant monsters or just like a fantasy element. Definitely like growing up as a kid, I worshipped movies that featured like Mothra. I also loved a lot of Ray Harryhausen movies that like showed Greek myths because I grew up reading Greek myths, and then some of my favorite movies were the ones that depicted them in a way that was like kind of scary but very accurate, and just like, you know, your imagination goes wild. So I think that's why I was drawn to film. And growing up, I think I developed a more sophisticated taste, I guess you could say. But I definitely, my favorite genre verges on science fiction fantasy, just like my taste in books, because I love things that are out of this world, especially if it uses fantasy to talk about real issues. I'm very drawn to those types of movies.
I do have to kind of follow that up. How do you feel about the fact that fantasy and science fiction is just, in general, underrepresented in the Oscars?
I think it's horrible. I think it's absolutely horrible.
That along with horror?
Horror is a big one.
I think it's just Silence of the Lambs is the only horror nominee.
Get Out got a lot of good buzz when it came out, which was sort of like very well deserved, but even so, I really wish there were more acting awards or considerations.
Toni Collette in Hereditary was robbed for a Best Actress.
I'd also argue Lupita Nyong'o's best performance is in Us. Yeah, there's just...
Even Nope this year.
Yep.
Completely snubbed.
Yep.
Yeah, no, there's definitely like I love these things. And okay, actually one of my first memories of the Oscars was growing up when Lord of the Rings was coming out. I remember being so excited because Return of the King swept that Oscar season. Well deserved, but that was the first time I think a movie that I loved and cared about actually got recognition. So that's probably when I started caring more about movies in general and maybe even paying attention to award shows, but it has been rare that you see any of the really good fantasy and sci-fi, although there are some on this list this year, so that is kind of exciting.
They do thankfully at least get noticed for visual effects usually, if nothing else.
Yeah, that's true. But, I mean, I think that you can tell a great story like Banshees of Inisherin or Women Talking with science fiction. That's completely possible, or with horror. So I do, in the future, I would love to see more of that, honestly.
Well, I suppose that aside, really the big topic for the year is always going to be Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have you seen all of them already, or are you still...
I have seen 9 out of 10.
I've seen all of them.
Yeah.
Put you guys in a slightly better position than me. I think I've seen 5 of these.
Not bad.
It's not bad, yeah.
Long list.
It is a long.
I feel like the list keeps getting longer, too, all of the time.
That is a fairly recent change, because it used to have just 5, same as most of the other categories. I'm kind of glad that they bumped it up to 10, but even still, sometimes,
Sometimes there's not 10 movies. I think this is a good list of movies, though. I think this is a pretty solid one.
I still feel very great about Top Gun Maverick.
I have things to say about that.
Well,
we'll get to that.
That's why we're here.
Yes.
So I suppose let's just start off, since I have a feeling there's going to be a probably very strong favorite in this group. But what is everyone's thought on the Best Picture this year?
If I had to pick one, I think I'll be, I'm going to go with the flow with, I think, everyone here. Everything Everywhere All at Once is the Best Picture of this year. Let's just forget about who wins. We all know what the Best Picture of this year was. And it's Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah, that we actually we saw that back in May when it was still in theaters, and at the time I remember thinking, if this does not get any recognition, I will riot, because this movie, I felt like this is going to be very dramatic, but I almost had like a spiritual experience watching it because it was so intense, and the message I thought was very beautiful, kind of absurd, but wonderful at the same time.
It is very much using science fiction to tell a very human story.
And that's the other point, is it science fiction.
It is a beautiful story, and it is also, it is almost certainly the funniest movie I saw this year as well, which is another uncommon feat for the Oscars, is getting something that's a comedy up on that list.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know how sometimes they'll say, oh, this thing, I laughed, I cried, almost as sort of a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. Yeah. This was one rare movie that was like, that is my genuine reaction.
Yep.
All of that happened during me watching that film.
It's an emotional roller coaster for sure.
And it made me want bagels.
Yes.
Yeah. Not wrong.
I wanted hot dogs. This must sound so weird. If you've not seen the film, please do watch it.
Yes.
It's actually weirder than it sounds. Like, as weird as this sounds talking about it, the end product is even stranger. But I mean that in the best way possible.
Yeah. And definitely going into it, I was familiar with the Daniels who directed it. They did the movie Swiss Army Man. Which
hilarious.
Very strange movie. And I remember liking it. It wasn't like perfect, but it was very likable, unforgettable for sure. So going into this, I was kind of like, okay, probably some of that. And this just tops it on so many levels. Maybe because it's a larger cast than their previous movie.
It's a great cast.
And it's
there's a reason a lot of those cast members are up for their own awards.
Yeah, speaking of making me cry, the movie, probably my favorite scene in Everything Everywhere is featuring Michelle Yeoh, who is up for Best Actress, and I just want to find his name on the list.
There he is.
In the supporting, it's I think it's Ki-Hugh Kwan.
Yes.
I'm not positive if I'm saying that right.
There's a wonderful scene between the two of them where he delivers this line that just it hit me right at the heart. And I don't think I've healed just because it's so wonderful.
There's something else about this movie too, that it shares similarities with the other movies, and that's that this movie is well over 2 hours long, which we will, I'm sure, talk about a little bit more coming into it.
I'm looking at this I think, is Top Gun the only one that was not 2 hours?
No, Women Talking was under 2 hours. But with Everything Everywhere All at Once, it being almost 2.5 hours, it feels like about an hour and 20 minutes. It is just, it starts and it goes and it doesn't stop. And by the end, you just feel like, I haven't felt like mush in a theater since watching Fury Road. That mushed me. And so did this one. It was just an experience that was, this is going to sound like cheesy, but it was also kind of a physical experience. You feel tired after this movie, and the fact that a movie can stimulate mentally and physically and give you just this entire experience is, that's why, that's what movies are for, right?
Absolutely.
And this movie just does that, and it makes you think, and it makes you laugh. And, even the arcs of the characters where they start, even Jamie Lee Curtis's character, her arc, she's not even the lead, but she has a full story in there. And it's great.
Multiple full stories.
Technically multiple, one for each universe.
I would say she's also very deserving of the nomination for actress in a supporting role, as is Stephanie. I'm so sorry, I cannot pronounce her.
Just Hugh or
Stephanie
Sue.
Hugh.
Again, our apologies to everyone whose names we will get wrong.
We should have done research ahead of time. But
No, we shouldn't.
Sorry. This movie, though, it really is an incredible cast. It's a great... The fact that all the leads, I think aside from Jamie Lee Curtis, are Asian, and it's such great representation. Another great addition to that movie is James Hong, who is in his 90s and has been in Hollywood since the 50s.
Honestly, I'm kind of upset that he didn't get any kind of nomination for this.
He got his walk of his star on the
Yeah, he
walk
does
of
have his
fame.
walk.
Has he had a Lifetime Achievement Award? Because I feel like he's...
That man
deserves it.
Anybody deserves it. Well, I mean, that is another topic I definitely want to touch on here eventually, but he is among the people who definitely deserves a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Absolutely.
He's been in movies since before I was born. Like, he's never not been in...
No, yeah. But even like the amount of TV shows, voice work, video games, he is everywhere.
And he does some fantastic roles. Like, very memorable voice. A person that the second you heard him open his mouth, if you didn't just recognize him immediately from other films, you'd have heard that voice in everything.
Absolutely. And he even recently, one of the award shows was either the SAG or maybe Critics' Choice. He, during an acceptance speech, did mention that when he started off in Hollywood, there were still white actors, pretending to be Asian because no one would hire actual Asians to play these roles. And now this movie is kind of like, finally, in many ways.
Yep.
I'm sure that's a fantastic capstone for him starting there, now seeing a movie that is, almost entirely Asian. Not only, nominated for Best Picture, but according to everyone here, the best picture
it is.
this year.
Yeah,
for sure.
If it doesn't win, I'm going to be a little upset.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I'd start walking to Hollywood. I'd start my walk.
Gonna have some words.
Yeah.
I'd like to have some words with Mr. Oscar.
Yeah, where is Oscar?
Just in the immortal words of George C. Scott, who was not at the Academy Awards to receive, I think it was Best Actor for Patton, instead referring to them as a gosh darn meat parade.
There you go.
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
As much as I enjoy watching these award shows, you do have to kind of know, and I guess this is worth saying, just these are great movies, but they definitely do not represent fairly, I believe, all the films that come out each year, and there have been some of the best movies made that were not acknowledged at Oscars during the year of their release.
Yeah.
So even though, this is definitely not the list, it's a great list to work off of, but I do recommend, expanding horizons and watching so many different films, because it's just one side of things.
Especially when you get to things that are kind of a bit unusual, like the international feature film is a category I have a lot of complaints about, in that each country essentially, well, other than, of course, America and Europe, anybody that doesn't speak English, that country gets to nominate one film.
Yeah.
So, one of my favorite films this year, RRR, India didn't...
I was shocked that was not
India
there.
put something else up instead, and honestly, that could have been on the Best Pictures choice, let alone...
I was shocked.
Really?
I definitely enjoyed that more than Top Gun Maverick, and I feel bad, because some of these I haven't seen. Of them that I've seen, Top Gun Maverick was the one that I'm just like, really? I've heard a lot of people were not thrilled with Elvis or women talking as well.
Can I just say, Elvis should not be on this list. It is the same. If you've seen Ray, you've seen Elvis. It's just bedazzled. If you've seen Bohemian Rhapsody, you've seen Elvis. It is the same musician biopic again. And how Everything Everywhere was nearly 2.5 hours, felt like an hour and a half. This was 2.5 hours. Felt like it took me all day to get through it. It was such a slog, but it was just bright, so give it the Academy Award. Oh, Tom Hanks. Oh, he was in it, I guess, under 50 pounds of makeup, kind of acting. Give him, and I don't know. I'm sorry. I think that movie should not be on this list. I'm getting a little heated over it, but...
Sorry to our listeners who did like Elvis, but I am going to side with John on this.
Yeah.
Probably my least favorite movie. I was prepared to love it because the director, Baz Luhrmann, I have a lot of fun watching his movies. Moulin Rouge is a cult classic and so much fun.
Romeo and Juliet was a good
Romeo
one.
And Juliet. Yeah, he gets a lot of good credit because his movies are bedazzled. They're beautiful. They usually incorporate lots of music. Elvis, though, I felt because it is a biopic of a real person, a very famous person, it fell into the trap that a lot of them do, where it's very... it might be a bit kinder because they cover up a lot of the awkward or even what they might deem uninteresting, but it becomes a very irresponsible representation of a person. And Elvis, there is some controversy with a lot of his backstory, which was very much covered up, and it left me to do my own research on him, which definitely made me a little, biased on how he was represented. It's not
historically not the nicest of persons.
Kind of a weirdo.
Definitely.
I feel like when we were getting into that stuff, the movie just stops, and it's like, okay, well, what about all this?
Yeah, I feel like one of the things, because I did pitch watching Elvis to some friends of mine, and I remember exactly what happened instead, which was we just watched Walk Hard.
Perfect.
I can see that being more
perfect.
Because that was basically the thought, was it's like, well, maybe, I literally said, maybe it'll be, kind of funny, like Walk Hard. And they're like, what's that? And I'm like, never mind, Elvis. You need to see Walk Hard.
That's fair. And to be fair, Elvis's music is such a huge part of our pop culture lexicon, and he's an important figure in history even. Just, I do feel like they definitely did not handle things very well. There was because of the time he was making music when rock and roll was being born, he did a lot of covers of songs written, he didn't write any of his own music, correct?
He didn't write it.
I don't believe
no.
Okay.
He was a performer.
Yeah. Definitely, and a really good performer. But a lot of his music came from black artists, where he made a lot of their original music famous. And in some ways, that's just how the music became. But the movie makes it look like everyone was thanking him for doing that. And again, you read a little history of it, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
Those men did not get any money from Elvis for him taking their music.
Like, honestly, there's a scene that features Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who is incredible if you know nothing about her, and she definitely was,
She can rip.
She can rip. The way she played guitar was revolutionary, and definitely you can see the influence on performers like Elvis. But honestly, when she showed up in this movie, he doesn't have a scene with her. She's just sort of featured in the background. I just sort of wished I was watching a biopic about her, because guess what? That would be really cool.
There's also just speaking of biopics about musicians, they got to start doing something else, I think, because it's getting repetitive. I've kind of started basing all music biopics off of Rocket Man, because that took the structure of it, gave it a sort of unreliable narrator, played with the formula, made the music part of the story, and told a great life story of Elton John in a different way. Whereas Elvis, I feel like the marketing just blew it up to be this fantastical kind of movie, and it's not. It's just another one.
Yeah. Of the music biopics this year, I guess Weird the Al Yankovic.
There you go.
Honestly, again, where's that one's Oscar nomination?
Yep.
Which is funny, because if you've seen the movie...
Oh, yeah.
I definitely had more fun with Weird than I did with Elvis.
I did too, for sure.
I mean, I guess we've already covered. I was going to ask, were there any films we felt shouldn't have been nominated this year? And apparently Elvis is certainly towards the top of that list.
That is, for me, kind of the list, I think. I mean, I have some opinions on other ones, but that's the only one that I felt like really was pushing it, in my opinion.
Well, we mentioned that usually it used to be about 5 movies. Do you think you guys could pick
parse this?
Like what are the 5 that belong here?
Let me just look at my cheat sheet.
Yeah, for reference, we are all looking at.
Yeah, go ahead.
So definitely, obviously, Everything Everywhere All at Once still lives in the list. The movie I liked right after that was Banshees of Inisherin. I'm also saying that right. Again, did not necessarily prepare my pronunciation. I found that such a haunting, also very funny, but also very sad movie that it has not left me since seeing it. I also do believe Tar should probably be on there, because Cate Blanchett's performance is pretty impressive, honestly. Like, I kind of forgot I was watching her, and she's a hard actress to not be aware of. And it was just sort of an interesting format movie. All Quiet on the Western Front, absolutely. That movie, very long, very hard to watch, but one of those movies that you're kind of glad you watched it, because it really adapted the book, but also included a lot more of the context of that time period to make a really very scary, but very real feeling depiction of World War I. Was that just 4?
That's 4.
Well, let's see. You know what? I would actually then say Triangle of Sadness would go on there because, again, that was weird and different, but also kind of impressive for what it was. And honestly, looking at the other movies, to be fair, I have not seen Avatar: The Way of Water. That's the one I did not see, mainly because I did not really want to see it. And it's 4-some hours long. Finding the time became difficult if you didn't see it in the earth.
Is it really 4 hours long?
Just about.
Oh my.
It's James Cameron. Honestly, movies being this long is his fault. This started with Titanic.
But those are definitely the 5 just that I would be happiest to work with. And I mean, there is one clear winner, but I would find the others very difficult to rank.
Okay, so yeah, number 1, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Have we talked about that yet? And then I'm going to get the contentious one out of the way. No one get upset. Avatar: Way of the Water. People have a lot of feelings about this one, but it's revolutionary at the end of the day. If you take a step back from what I feel like has kind of become this phenomenon of hate towards these movies. The first one looks great, kind of weak in story. The second one amps the story up a lot and surprisingly gave me characters that I legitimately cared for. And when the climax of the movie happens, me and my buddy who saw it were like slowly inching forward to the edge of our seat because we actually cared. And we actually looked at each other at one point and I was like, oh my God, this is actually a good movie. But all that aside, the work in the cinematography and the effects is honestly mind-blowing, and they have to actually create new technology to make this work.
That's the one thing I will always respect Cameron for is even when his movies are sort of the same-ish, he elevates all of his, like, when the first Avatar came out, nobody had a 3D movie theater. Who thought they were going to need that ever?
Right.
And now that's just part of cinema forever again.
But yeah, he's going back to his water fascination with, like, you know, he did The Abyss, and that had some amazing work with water, but this is just, I honestly couldn't believe it. And that was 2, right?
Yep.
After that, Tar. Tar is a fascinating slow burn that covers so much. It's both a character piece, but also a scathing kind of look at the world we're in right now. How we view gender, how we view art, how society affects the art, and kind of placing human beings on the pedestal of gods, and how easily in this day and age that can be torn down. And by the way, the cinematography in that is just, I can't believe a human being did it. After that, I would say, speaking of scathing, Triangle of Sadness. The less I say about this movie, the better, because going in blind is a treat. It starts one way, the middle is something else, and the third act is something completely different. It's unsettling, it's hysterical. Woody Harrelson's in it, I mean, come on. And let me just say, the middle part of this movie, there's a scene with a storm. You've never seen anything like it, I can guarantee you. And then after that, I would say Banshees of Inisherin. That's between that one and All Quiet on the Western Front, but Banshees, I'm a big Martin McDonagh fan. I think as a writer, he can balance tragedy and comedy, which, I mean, that's kind of the two sides of entertainment, is tragedy and comedy, and the fact that he can just turn it into one thing. He did that in Bruges. He did that in 3 Billboards. I feel like 7 Psychopaths is a bit too satirical for anything, but this, coming off 3 Billboards, is kind of perfect. It tells a really kind of odd story. The story is also kind of a metaphor for something else, and you kind of just find yourself peeling back the layers of it and getting obsessed with it. So those are my 5. No offense to All Quiet on the Western Front there. That's a close one.
I'm a little surprised you didn't pick that on.
I am too, but here we are.
Having now pared down a list of 10 to 5, I guess I should ask, are there any major snubs this year? Either in Best Picture or any of the other categories, really?
Also a good question, and I hate this. This is why I feel kind of guilty and want to definitely say this is not the reason you watch movies is the Oscars, but I've been having a hard time thinking of what other movies I watched last year.
For me, one that I don't know that I'd put it in Best Picture, but I definitely feel it deserved at least some actors or actress roles is The Glass Onion.
Glass Onion was a blast,
yeah,
to be fair. It did get nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay,
which
I'm explaining to.
It's a weird one because it uses characters from the first movies. It's not an original screenplay, even though those characters were created by the same person. But apparently this is normal for sequels. It just doesn't come up
It's just odd.
Because
sequels
generally don't do very well for Oscar nominations. Yeah.
Well, how come that's there and not Avatar?
Well, that wasn't up for screenplay, though.
Yeah, I don't think Avatar... Avatar does not have the screenplays. It has... I'm a little surprised Avatar doesn't have directing, but it does have visual effects.
As it should, for sure.
Is one of those things that kind of... Again, I don't know why Top Gun is in visual effects. They didn't use them. That's just cinematography. The, 2 scenes that actually have CGI are awful.
I was really surprised Top Gun wasn't in cinematography. That was one of the first things I said was, oh, that's some great cinematography. And then I looked at this list and it's like, oh, it's not on there. Oh, Elvis is there, don't worry.
Oh, dear. Wait. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was just going to say, you mentioned earlier that Nope got snubbed, and that was definitely one of my favorites that I watched this year. It's funny because when we watched it, we had a discussion about, wow, this felt like Jordan Peele's Spielberg movie, where it kind of had the vibe of, Spielberg's heyday, the 80s, but obviously with, the signature Jordan Peele writing and characters and just overall vibe. And it's funny because, The Fabelmans also happened this year. It was on neither of our best of lists, because talk about Spielberg doing Spielberg.
Yeah.
But the term for that is not something I can actually say on this podcast.
I mean, it seems like he's his own biggest fan.
Yeah.
For sure.
The Northman was a movie this year that,
I forgot about that.
I did too until I looked at my history. And
Northman was great.
That was great. I mean, I'm a fan of that director. I think his earlier movies are a bit stronger, but that was a pretty impressive film. And again, even for cinematography or editing, sound design even, pretty great.
And that's nowhere on?
It's nowhere.
No,
not on this at all.
Again, it verges on horror. It's definitely more of a historical epic action, but there definitely is a horror vibe to it, as are this director's, Roger Eggers' other films. And I think horror is one of the strongest genres of film, and it's very rare that it gets represented.
Very true.
I think they sometimes miscategorize dramas as horrors, but...
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, watching some dramas feels like a horror, to be fair.
You, Elvis.
Well, maybe we can peel back a little bit of the sort of the screen here. Who chooses the winners for the Academy Awards?
I mean, the Academy, isn't
it? The Academy is made up of members. It's sort of like you can pay and be in the Academy. I don't quite know what the fee is. I'm sure it's nothing I don't think I can afford that.
But
there are people who are not known celebrities or filmmakers who are in the Academy, and I'm pretty sure it's a system of votes.
Yeah, it is.
Unfortunate in some cases.
True.
Again, a thing that will always annoy me is the Academy's very blatant mistreatment of the animated feature films.
Yes,
that
I was hoping we would talk about animation's history here.
You mean the Disney category?
Yes, correct.
Unfortunately, very frequently. And to be fair, although the rumor is it was actually made to prevent Shrek from winning Best Picture, but...
What?
Yes. But the general consensus was this was a category so that they didn't have to keep giving the Walt Disney Company special awards. I don't know why I do air quotes on a purely audio format, but boy do I ever do them a lot.
Hopefully they can feel that.
They can feel my
listeners
spite.
Please comment if you can feel the energy of the air quote. Testing our 4D medium here.
That is interesting because, year after year, I feel like when if you do the Oscars ballot with your friends or just playing with yourself, you're usually going to pick a Disney movie as that category. Sometimes it's because it's the only movie I think people have seen of. They do usually feature...
That's a thing that is very common movies. For members of the Academy to have said is, I voted for the Disney one because it's the only one I watched. And I'm of the opinion, as somebody who's very fond of animation, for an opposite to this, The Annie Awards, which are the animation awards, you're not allowed to vote in a category if you haven't seen all of the films.
That's great.
That should be the rule, I feel
You
like,
would think
for all
that
of
would
these,
be,
too.
Yeah. They've had some of their own problems, including apparently at one point DreamWorks just gave all of their employees memberships. And How to Train Your Dragon just swept that year because roughly 70% of the voting people worked on the film.
But that
Sounds
movie
fair.
was fire. I
mean,
don't
No,
understand.
it's also the correct choice, but that's a coincidence.
Maybe they were really afraid that whatever Disney film they were up against was just going to win.
As far as this year's animated feature film, I'm personally hoping they give it to Del Toro's Pinocchio, but
I, too.
Correct.
don't be surprised if it just is Turning Red because it's the Disney film.
And Turning Red was pretty good. I did enjoy that. Not my favorite Pixar, but it was...
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, if they don't give it to Pinocchio, my next choice on here would be Puss in Boots.
That film is incredible, and I did not expect. I haven't seen much. I haven't seen much on this. I've seen barely anything on this list, but I will say Puss in Boots was fantastic on so many levels.
Can we clip that for the, just...
Yeah,
that'll be the teaser.
That's it, yeah.
In the interest of fairness, I am kind of surprised, but again, the animation, unfortunately, is usually regulated to its own category. But that, again, comparing it to Elvis, I'd give that a cinematography award over Elvis.
I think
Yeah,
animation
I would agree
should
with
be
that.
considered for some of these awards because they still include sound design, editing, cinematography, absolutely.
I mean, occasionally they'll break in with the best original song and things like that.
True. And there have been times
Which again
that-
is usually Disney.
Yeah, usually. I do remember animated films have been nominated for Best Picture. I think Up was nominated.
It was, I believe.
Yeah.
That's I forgot about that.
As was
Disney
Toy Story.
Pixar.
True. That makes sense. I do agree with you, Jeff. Pinocchio was incredible. Another movie that I haven't really stopped thinking about since watching it. And I'm a little biased. Guillermo del Toro is probably my favorite director. Not gonna lie.
A gentleman who definitely deserves more Oscars than he has.
A man who has been
He's just
snubbed
getting
too
started.
many times.
He
Yeah.
did win, at least. I am happy and grateful for that.
He's got one, which I guess that brings us into the subject of, are there any people who you feel are long overdue for awards? Because I do a little research before I do these, and was terrified, in a manner of speaking, to discover that despite decades of films, Sam Jackson has no Academy Awards.
That is so...
He should, at this point, he should have a Lifetime Achievement Award. And also, Willem Dafoe has no Academy Awards.
My favorite actor? Whoa.
I just feel like these are people who are well overdue for
Absolutely.
something.
Willem Dafoe. And I do remember he was nominated, I believe, for the Florida Project, which...
He was great in that movie.
Incredible. He was the only known actor in that film, but how he interacted with the children in that, awesome. That definitely probably solidified him as my favorite actor.
He was
And
great
him
in
as the
that
Green
movie.
Goblin, let's be real, guys.
I think someone needs to give Andy Serkis his Oscar
Thank you.
already, because
Actually, yeah.
it's
Yes.
but that leads to, that's a whole other thing, is motion capture as acting, because every time you see him in a motion capture role, him as Caesar in the new Planet of the Apes trilogy,
Yeah.
is his facial expressions incredible. He brings that character to life with minimal dialogue. I mean, he does talk, but it's mostly his physical acting, and he can play literally anything.
And he pretty much has.
And he pretty much has, yeah. I mean, he needs one. I've been saying that for years now, I think, that Andy Serkis needs his Oscar.
I think he is long overdue. I mean, it is kind of a weird one, because mocap, they very quickly made a rule in regard to mocap that does not qualify as animation. Because they wanted to avoid... Basically, the decision was made because they wanted to avoid something like, let's say, any of the Marvel movies from being technically available as Best Animated Picture. If you really want to get down to it, Guardians of the Galaxy, 2 of the main characters are just CGI. If Roger Rabbit counts as an animated picture, does this or doesn't it?
That's true.
That's why all of the kind of labels are kind of insane, because they're just movies.
Yeah.
If mocap isn't animation, then it must be live action.
Then, yeah.
So then Andy Serkis should get an Oscar for Best Actor.
Yeah. Best supporting actor.
I think he should have been nominated. Again, when Return of the King swept the Oscars, they did have a few actors nominated, but he was not one of them. And let's be real, when you watch that series, who do you remember?
Yeah.
Probably Ian McKellen. But
also
Maybe they should just remold the Oscar into like either Andy Serkis or Sam
just
Jackson.
cover it with like little weird dots specifically so they can give it to the mocap artist.
A little camera for the...
Yeah.
They gave Walt Disney a special one for, Snow White with like seven little Oscars. They can do special. They can branch out and have fun. But they're the Academy.
Are there any actresses that have been snubbed? We talked about a bunch of actors.
I'm sure there are a lot of actresses who've been snubbed.
You brought up Toni Collette. Has she won an Oscar? Because she also kills it in everything she's done.
She is always on it. And she's another one that can be in any kind of movie and adapt very well.
Yeah, absolutely. She can do horror, comedy, drama. I'm kind of blanking.
I am too. I am too.
What does that say about, how we represent actors and actresses in Hollywood? Oops. I'm also just...
Well, would you then say that maybe that's a negative of the Oscars, is that it does pick from the best of the best, air quotes, but it does neglect a lot of other actors and actresses from even being known.
And actually, it's worth noting, especially this year, it was pointed out that female directors are notoriously snubbed at the Oscars
all
as well.
the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's none this year.
And there were actually quite a few films on this list, I believe, directed by women.
Well, yeah, Women Talking was, and I'm sure others were too. but then again, I don't know. I mean, it's very uneven, and it's I'm just looking at the list, and I really can't even tell you.
And it's funny because I think some people, like right now, we're even making an example of this by blanking, but then if you really do start to think of some of the most iconic films, you might really discover, I think one that's sort of shocking is American Psycho, which is sort of having a resurgence in, cult film status right now, directed by a woman. Mm-hmm. Again, a lot of horror.
What is her name? She did The Babadook and The Nightingale.
Yes. Australian.
Yeah, she is next level. I think she's incredible.
It's the Wachowskis.
Wachowski is two of my
Also
favorite.
Might not have an Oscar.
Well,
thinking about it.
I don't believe they do.
Not even for Matrix? Like the original?
Maybe for some of the special effects,
but that'd be, and technically that would go to the special effects team.
Yeah.
It would them.
Yeah.
Also, Jennifer Kent, for anyone
Jennifer
interested.
Kent, yes.
Please watch her films.
With caution.
With caution.
Yeah.
They might mess you up.
They're intense.
Watch The Babadook, but understand that you need to feel safe before you watch The Babadook, because you won't after.
Yeah, that's a creepy movie. I loved that though. I'm due for a rewatch on that one, I think.
I don't see Mad God on here.
No, I think that kind of went way under way too far under the radar, despite it being made by a legend.
It was also on Shudder. Is that one of the services that's recognized by the Academy, or
the Academy does seem to dislike direct-to-streaming movies, although they kind of had to start adding them after the pandemic.
I feel like they only do it they have no choice.
Yeah.
With certain movies, where they have to do it, they will, but they're not going to. I'm sure, well, no, I was going to say Glass Onion, but that did come out, but I feel like that was mainly a Netflix movie. I'm sure they begrudgingly put that in the adapted screenplay.
I don't know if Turning Red made it to theaters. I think that was direct to Disney Plus.
Oh, but it's Disney, so
I mean, yes,
we can forget about it.
And The Sea Beast is Netflix.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
So they're at least willing to look to those subjects here and there.
It will never be their first choice, for sure.
When did it come out? Maybe it didn't make the deadline?
Mad God?
Yeah.
That was the middle of the year, I thought.
Oh,
although, to be fair, June, July movies tend not to get nominations very frequently. Mm-hmm. It's either, you're at the beginning of when they're allowed to choose, or you're at the end. That stuff in the middle tends to get forgotten.
Yeah.
It's part of why the blockbuster movies tend not to get picked up, but also because, sci-fi and action are not the Academy's favorites.
Okay, but I'm glad you said that. But I do want to mention that is one reason why I'm glad Top Gun is on here.
Yeah,
because I like blockbuster
action movie, and it is nice to see it.
And it was very good. I mean, it's not full disclosure, I hate the first Top Gun. I think it's a joke. But this one I thought was fantastic as like a summer blockbuster. I think the cinematography we've talked about with the planes, very little CGI went into that. They used CGI only to like add some things in to make it look like they're flying real close. But all the things in the cockpit and everything, it's all real. And I think it may not be like the real, like what's considered my air quote artsy movies, but it is, isn't it? I mean, that takes a lot of guts to make a movie like that. And not only make a movie like that, but also tell actually a surprisingly, like, okay, it's a little like, the story isn't amazing. It's kind of there just to string together the action sequences.
Action shots, yeah.
But like, it kind of tricks you into thinking you're watching like a really well-told story, because I was into it from the very beginning. And I actually I really enjoyed the character of Maverick, even after making fun of him for how many years because of him in the first Top Gun. So I'm happy it's here. It's not on the same level as All Quiet on the Western Front or Everything Everywhere All at Once, but it's giving it. And Avatar doesn't count because that is it's James Cameron.
It's James Cameron. You
of course.
Don't bet against James Cameron.
No, but this is the guy who did Top Gun Maverick. He did Oblivion. He did Tron Legacy, which is another sequel that's better than the original.
A lot better than.
And now he did Top Gun Maverick, so it's cool for him, and it's also cool for blockbuster movies that they kind of got a little something this year.
Yeah, I definitely, the Oscars, I do believe they need to consider more diversity on many levels, genre for sure, but also, as we had touched on, with like gender and race and really just representation as a whole. Like, there are so many other movies out there. Oh, you even brought up international films, like, I mean, maybe they're just trying to strain what is a workable amount for, I guess, audiences and people interested. But it is such a hard thing to, like, give this amazing award when you feel like, oh, but was everything fairly represented? And maybe that's not always going to be the case, but just there seems to be more of an effort, like, every year. People are sort of, like, disappointed and just definitely disillusioned with them as a whole, because it's just like, when will I feel like my interests are represented, whether with, the films I enjoy or really speak to me, or seeing artists, actors, actresses who represent me better. And I think we're getting better, but it's really not until they've been called out on it that they've made some strides.
Sure. Academy in the past several years has had a lot of people point out hey, why is it almost exclusively basically just a very specific subset that is getting this representation here?
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And there's definitely so much of this is, I believe, the decision process. They would never really admit it, but it is political. Like, even when you look at some movies that won in previous years that were definitely either very unpopular or were questioning why. Sometimes you look back at the producers or the makers, and it was a political move. I mean, the Academy still has a lot to answer for, like, a lot of Weinstein films getting more attention than they deserved at the time, and then that didn't age well at all.
Yeah, he was definitely paying some people in the Academy.
But let's just take the Miramax logo off some things and call it a day.
It is very disappointing as a guy who grew up in the 90s. Like, so many movies I loved were Miramax movies. It's like, oh, I've been handing money hand over fist to a monster.
Yeah.
I mean, not to be gloom and doom, but we probably are without realizing it a lot of times.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
No ethical consumption under capitalism, I think, is the rallying cry there.
And I think that is definitely, like, one of the things where it becomes a struggle. And you kind of brought it up. Tar is one of the movies that I think tackles that of, like, how can you make good art without commercial gain and capitalism and sort of this celebrity getting in the way and possibly poisoning things. Mm-hmm. Actually, Tar is a good representation of this conversation because it is about this powerful creative force of classical music and her being her own downfall because she's not only full of herself from all the accolades, but completely doesn't even really understand criticism.
She's not even on the same planet anymore in this movie. Like, she is not, I'm not trying to, like, just, go, let's talk about Tar now, but, like, just It's true though, because it handles that material very well because it's all told from her point of view. So there's this huge disconnect between her and everyone else, and you're always on her. She's probably in every scene, and you only see all of the conflict and scandal and all of that through her eyes. And we as the audience can be like, oh, ooh.
This doesn't seem okay.
Which is a really interesting way of tackling that subject, honestly.
And you know what? It's actually kind of great to have a movie, and maybe this is where Elvis has its place. Contrasting Elvis and Tar is they're both.
Oh man, yeah.
I mean, Tar is a fictional person, which I did not know until trying to find a book about the person for a library display, and that embarrassing moment realizing she's not real. But again, when the movie is marketed, you would have assumed.
Yeah.
And again,
It's even called Tar. You normally when you see that, so that's what I mean. When they put the person's name, it's usually like, oh, well, they're real.
They're real, and
which I think was
I
done
didn't
on
know about
purpose.
her.
Oh yeah,
It's actually maybe
it's
a really
definitely
movie.
supposed to feel like it was a true story.
It feels like one for sure.
And yeah, that's the thing. I think they refer to it as these are based on events that absolutely could have happened, or something along those lines with the marketing.
For sure. But just to contrast that with something like Elvis is you get the rise and fall of these powerful figures, but Tar, you're left with a very kind of like bad taste in your mouth of, whoa, that's what happens. Elvis, maybe because he's been dead for quite some time, it's a lot easier to soften. Yeah, sorry to break it to you, but it's easier to soften kind of like a person's impact maybe on art and celebrity, but actually, it's kind of, I feel like those are two good movies to like have this discussion around, and interesting they're even represented in the Oscars for that reason.
So then where would something like The Fabelmans fall into, where it's the person who's the director is making the movie about themselves?
Well, John, I'm going to credit you because my favorite review of this movie was after we watched it. You said not every person deserves or is worthy of an origin story.
No, yeah, and he's not, sorry.
And like that being said, I do enjoy a lot of Spielberg's films. I think he's a good director. As interesting as it is for someone who is also very passionate about film, not just the movies he makes, but the movies that he grew up with and that have inspired him.
Yeah.
It didn't do enough to really justify its existence.
Yeah, there was no real conflict in it, which was actually kind of nice, honestly, watching it. Like, let me say, I had a good time watching it. I did. But it feels a little bit empty. Like, it's an easy watch because there's no huge conflict in it. So you can just kind of enjoy what you're watching. But then by the end, it's like, man, that was 2.5 hours of just nothing really.
Yeah.
I will say for The Fabelmans, my favorite cameo of the year was in The Fabelmans.
Yes.
Oddly enough.
Yes, for sure.
Fans of Twin Peaks, you might know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Does it just start speaking backwards in like a checker floor?
He enters
fans
the
of
red
Twin
room.
Peaks.
It's wild. There's just jazz music playing, and kind of like I'm worried that Spielberg is actually a doppelganger of himself, and that's the Spielberg we know.
Boy, this is really reaching deep into the well there.
Spielberg being a pod person would probably be the most Spielberg thing.
Yeah.
I just really wanted to hijack this podcast and talk about Twin Peaks. Sorry.
That's fine.
We'll find an excuse one of these days.
Oh, could you?
Please.
I will say the only thing I know about Tar is that it is in fact the best Monster Hunter movie that exists.
You're
Wild.
right. You are right.
That's all. I'm just going to drop that there and leave it, let it fester.
I feel like we've given a lot of hints. If people have not seen these movies but know about these other weird things we're comparing them to, they'll be like, what is this?
We like a lot of things.
if it encourages anybody to see them, to find out what the heck we're talking about, good.
I mean, yeah, I definitely say, like, a lot of these are worth watching. It's sort of like even when I read a bad book, have to go to a book club to talk about the book. Sometimes it's so much fun to just talk about something you hated together with people.
Oh, yeah.
As long as you're not out to hurt anyone's feelings or call their opinions stupid. Because we all like different weird things, and I definitely like some questionable movies of just, like, I like it because I like it. I mean, I mentioned I worship giant monster movies, so
Yeah, but those
guilty.
Are smart. I mean,
yes, but other people probably think we are not qualified to
Bunch
talk
of
about these
weirdos.
movies.
I don't know. Shin
We went
Godzilla
to
didn't
film
win.
school.
Shin Godzilla should have won.
Should have won Best Picture, just
Win
saying.
Japan's entry.
Should have just slept.
It may have been Japan's entry, to be fair, because we don't get to see every country's choice.
Also, people who deserve a Lifetime Achievement Award is Godzilla. Come on. Or with Cinema
Honestly?
View, not
Unironically.
Godzilla.
Unironically, yes. Because, like, I think the original person that the War of the Suit has passed on. I know
Yes.
they got, like, at least in Japan, several Lifetime Achievement style awards.
Believe. Well, yeah, he definitely has a star on the Walk of Fame.
Yes.
Oh, good. I would really travel to Hollywood just to see that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's just so good to like talk about things, and that is what art does, whether it's good or bad. If it gets you talking, it is being effective.
Yeah, and if you like Elvis, that's great. Like, I'm glad. Like, it's good to like things, and just because we may poo-poo it doesn't mean that don't watch it, don't enjoy it. It's great if you do and you like it. That's awesome, I think.
Yep, I've talked to enough people who told me that I'm crazy for thinking Everything Everywhere All at Once is just the best movie of all time. At least at this moment in time, I'm saying that. And I mean, again, I've also heard some really valid points as to why they didn't think it was so great. That is fine. I'm happy to talk about these things, and I think there needs to be more love for just like experiencing these kind of things together. So thank you for having us on this podcast.
Yeah.
That is just about time, I believe, as well. So, let's see. Do I have a good final question? There is actually one other thing I'm kind of curious about. We've talked a lot about the films and the awards, and we haven't talked a lot about the ceremony itself.
Oh, yeah, all right.
How do you guys feel about all of that pomp and circumstance?
Who's hosting this year?
Jimmy Kimmel.
Kimmel.
Who has hosted many years. I think he's a safe pick because
That's what they
they're
need.
still a little worried about last year.
What, did something happen?
Yeah.
So the ceremony, it's kind of a mixed bag for me. I like a lot of the things about it. I like when they do like the montages of like different movies from the past. I like when they celebrate the movies.
yes.
I do enjoy the Oscars, and there are some years where it's been almost like all about the movies, and I really like that. But you gotta admit it's a little ridiculous, and it's the part of the reason I watch it is just to see what nonsense is gonna go down, and it might be as crazy as a presenter getting assaulted, or it may be just something as weird as just
Streakers or political.
or just saying, John Travolta saying Adele Dazeem. Like, maybe that's also just the fun part.
I do think they need to have more fun. One of the standout years was when Hugh Jackman hosted.
He was great.
Yeah.
He was amazing. I mean, mainly because he is not only just an action star, he's a song and dance man, which is sort of like the perfect host. I remember very clearly he did a huge musical montage with Beyonce, all of like famous movie music. That's so
That's
cool.
celebrating the music in movies.
Exactly.
That's what
It definitely
needs to
felt
be.
more like this is why we love to do this. And yeah, there's presenters, I can't even tell you what they did or if I like them. And there's some I definitely did not care for. I do think the Muppets should host every year. That would just be incredible.
That would be something.
They should present
For sure.
every award. It would be, yes. Statler and Waldorf need to sit always heckling everyone,
Just
even the
when we need
winners.
when we need to cut to commercial or when somebody's speech gets a little too long, we just cut up to Statler. and
Get off the stage already.
Oddly enough, the video game awards have the Muppets sort of on lock, which has been strange.
Years.
We should be taking notes from the video game awards, clearly.
I mean, no, actually, with that one notable exception, it's so.
There was the time Keanu Reeves just kind of showed up and everyone paid attention for
Also
once,
should be at the
but
Oscars always.
Yeah, honestly, Keanu should host. That I would watch.
he should just be there and then they just, just have him just stand there
I
for
believe
3
he is
hours.
presenting at least one award this year.
I was about to say, I'd be surprised if he didn't.
Certainly a reasonable host.
Nicolas Cage should host.
Yes.
It would probably be a disaster, but
it would be a train wreck.
I want Nicolas Cage as his character in Vampire's Kiss to host the Oscars.
I want him to play a different character every time.
Oh yeah, he can go through his whole filmography every time he comes out. He says he can be, the guy from Con Air. Then, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
If it's not going to be good, it can at least be chaotic.
Yeah,
which we kind of have gotten the past couple of years. Unfortunately.
Does that mean for the animated feature he comes dressed as his character from Astro Boy?
I was gonna say Spider-Man Noir.
Yeah,
the Croods.
Or you love that movie. I know for a fact that's your favorite movie.
Weren't you saying that on the podcast?
Weren't you saying that should have been nominated for animated feature and Best Picture that year?
know.
Why are you laughing? I'm pretty sure that
I'm trying
happened.
to remember what year that movie came out.
Well, because all you can think about is the Croods. That's really just takes your... I've never even seen it, I think about it.
I remember not
saying anything.
I remember not thinking anything about it, but then when awards season started coming around, just because it was like one of the 3 animated movies, there were starting to be like The Croods nominated for an Academy Award, and I was like, these commercials are 100% different energy than what they were presenting when it was in theaters. 'Cause it was like, it's The Croods, and then it was like, Academy Award winning, nominated The Croods, starring Nicolas Cage.
I'm
He
sorry.
got any Oscars?
He does, actually.
Good.
Was that for Leaving Las Vegas?
I think so.
Right, yeah.
People have questioned, why does he have an Oscar? And I'm like, why?
Because he puts in the work.
He does.
I mean,
He has the
passionate
grind set, is what he
We can
has.
also do a podcast just on Nicolas Cage, let's be real.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
that could be a fun one down the line.
But are there any final thoughts about the Oscars that you guys would like to express or mention?
We're making a pilgrimage to Hollywood if Everything Everywhere doesn't win. Saying, got some explaining to do.
Find the Academy.
I will find them, and I will give them a strong talking to, and that's it.
Very particular set of skills.
I complain a lot.
Just clip this part of the podcast and like send it to their voicemail.
Exactly.
Yeah, that'll
that's
teach 'em.
great.
That'll teach them.
Liam Neeson's.
No, yeah, I think it was a pretty good lineup of movies, and while they may not be the quote unquote best movies of the year, it still gets you to watch a movie, and I never regret watching a movie no matter how bad it is. It just every year it just gives me 10 movies to watch. So that's why I like it.
All right. Well, thank you both for being here so much to talk about the biggest event of the year in
Sure thing.
cinema.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. I'd like to thank my parents, my husband, my friends. You guys are my
I'm sorry, your end of speech music is the Jurassic Park theme.
It should be, and it should be the one on flute. And just the volume ever so slightly increased until it's drowning everything out.
That's it.
But also they should cool it and let some
Let me have my moment.
people
Let
go.
People have their time. Well, again, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And if you listeners would like to join us, you can head over to lansdowne.library.org/podcasts, where you'll see a green Register Here button. That'll take you to a little form you can fill out, and it'll be talking to you soon enough.
This has been the Lansdowne Library's Geek Out Podcast.
And join us next month for something a little special.